Hello. Ooh, there we go. I'm just going to usher you to your seats slightly because we've got the time cap of the evening service, and I know I can talk, so I feel like I should give myself as much time as possible. Yes, teas, maybe coffees, I'm not sure, water, snacks, and then we'll get started. Oh, and if anyone wants to try mate, raise your hand and I'll bring you some. Do you want more? It's like herbs with water. Kind of like green tea. Yeah, good idea actually. There we go. If you want someone, ask Paul now. There we go. All right. I'll get started. Thank you all so much for coming. There's so many of you. I actually hadn't prepared for this many people. Just thanks for coming. Thanks for supporting me now, but also for the last 7 months, 8 months, years, all the way through. How this evening is going to work, it's basically going to be, I go through my PowerPoint, I talk. You'll be pleased to know it's all photos. There's like 0 words, basically, so it's just photos. I'll talk you through the photos. We'll go through kind of chronologically from sort of start to finish. Depending how long I take, there is a little quiz at the end. Some of you might have done it already. Some of you might not. And then after that, we'll have time for questions. All right. So, I begin. I can't multitask. Okay, so many of you will know that I went to Argentina. And I went to Argentina with the Church Mission Society, also known as CMS. So the Church Mission Society is a Christian organization. And yeah, they work in Latin America, but they also work all over the world. So they work all over the world, and their main mission ethos, is that what you'd call it, Paul? Ethos? The edges? It's all about working at the edges. And when I say edges, I don't just mean the edges geographically. We're not just talking ends of the earth, far side of the map. I'm thinking the edges of society, the edges of your own community. So we have edges here in marching, we have edges in our schools, etc. So CMS's whole premise is working at the edges. So I went with CMS as a short-termer. So here I've shown you a few of the different short-termer things, short-termer placements that CMS offer. So in the middle, that was the one I went on, which is urban ministry in northern Argentina. But you can also see they have short-term placements in South Asia, in North Africa, in Brazil, in Kenya. It's quite extensive. So I was there as a short-termer, but if you want to know more about CMS, do talk to me, do come ask me questions, but do talk to Paul, who is here. He is the regional director for Latin America. It's kind of his job title. So his job is to work with all of the mission partners of CMS all over Latin America. So hence why he's often away on very exciting trips. But yeah, so why Argentina? Many of you all might know that my mum grew up in Argentina and Paraguay, and that my grandparents were actually missionaries in northern Argentina and Paraguay. So you can see here some of the photos. My grandfather up in the Chaco. This is my grandma with some of my uncles and aunts, I'm not sure which ones. My grandfather in the Chaco with a mud-filled car, and some of the indigenous communities. So for me, it was a really amazing trip because I was actually working in and with the people that my grandparents worked with and lived with and knew. So it really challenged me in my faith, but also it gave me the opportunity to learn about my family history, to walk in the footsteps, and to learn more about my grandfather, because he passed away when my mum was a teenager, so I never met him. So I got to sort of learn more about him from people who really knew him, who worked with him, and who knew more about him than maybe others who I've spoken to before. All right. A little timeline. So I broke it into 4 sections because this is how my brain remembers it. So we've got section 1, which is from my arrival, so sort of Uruguay, Paraguay, up until I arrived in Salta. Section 2, which is Salta BP, which stands for Before Parents. I was slightly inspired. And then we've got Salta AP, After Parents. And then we've got section 4, which is my travels through Peru and Bolivia and Chile. So, section 1, Buenos Aires, Uruguay, and Paraguay. So I arrived in Buenos Aires at the beginning of February, and I went straight and stayed with my cousin, who you can see here. It's my cousin Nathan. He was living in Buenos Aires at the time. He was working at a school as an English teacher. So I stayed with him for about 5 days. Was a bit overwhelmed by the sheer size of Buenos Aires. Honestly, it's huge. Did some sightseeing, did some tourism, ate a lot of steak, and he started introducing me to things like empanadas and alfajores. I was very happy those first few days. It was looking good. And then after these few days, I headed to Uruguay. So in Uruguay, I sort of got a ferry and then got multiple buses and traversed across to the east coast of Uruguay to a town called La Paloma. And in La Paloma, I was working on a farm, as seen here. So I did all sorts of things from gardening, planting peanuts, lots and lots of weeding. Oh, my back was in pain every day. Chopping wood. I have about 185 time lapses of me chopping logs. I was very proud. Lots of chopping wood. So I was there for 2 weeks, and it was a really good 2 weeks looking back, but it was also a really tough 2 weeks. A lot of you will remember this, because that first 2 weeks, suddenly I was like, what am I doing? And I really felt the isolation. I hadn't expected to be quite so alone as I was there. The farm was sort of in the middle of nowhere. There wasn't really anyone else working on it. And so a lot of time spent alone. And this was right at the beginning. So I was hoping to meet people and make connections. And actually, it was very still. And there wasn't a lot to do. And so I really struggled in that first 2 weeks with just being alone. And I was like, oh, God, this is not why I came out to South America. But I look back and I realized it was a really important time of learning to be still with God. Then after that, I briefly headed back to Buenos Aires before heading up to Iguazu Falls, which is amazing. So, so amazing. So you can see a very happy selfie with my monkey, who I've bought tonight. This is Mungo, by the way. He came everywhere with me and hopefully can go with you on your travels at some point. So I enjoyed the falls, and then the next day I headed to Paraguay. So you can see in the bottom middle picture a large bridge. So on one side of the bridge, you've got Paraguay. On the other side of the bridge, you have Brazil, and then I'm standing in Argentina. So it's like a T-junction of countries. So I sort of just stood there for about 10 minutes staring, like, wow, that's 3 countries at once. And you can actually see, if you look closely, as the 2 rivers meet, there's 2 different colors. So one's more kind of murky brown. I think that's the Iguazu River, is more murky brown. And then the sort of Brazilian river that comes down is like a crystal blue. So when they merge, they change colors, and it's quite cool. But I got on a little car ferry on foot and headed across. Had a slightly sketchy moment on the other side, but we survived and it was okay. And then sort of headed across Paraguay to Asuncion, which is the capital. So I spent a week in Asuncion with some missionaries called the Hawksbees, and it was really good. I visited their church. So this is their church here. You can see they had sort of like a volleyball, football social that I went to. That bottom corner is on the bus. Oh, it was the worst bus I've ever been on. It was only like 8 hours, but it was boiling hot, and it was crammed with people, and people kept getting on and selling you like bread and like batteries and everything. Oh, I was exhausted. But the lady next to me did buy me a little cheaper, which is like a little cheese donut bread. Very, very good. So I spent a week in Asuncion. I visited the churches that my grandparents went to, and I met some people that they knew. I got the chance to go up into the Paraguayan Chaco, which was really impressive and amazing. So the top left picture, this is the inside of a church in an indigenous community called Maclawaya. And the bottom middle picture is the outside of that same church. So this is up in the Chaco and the communities, and there's actually a photo, I think is in this book at the front, of my grandfather outside that same church in the 1980s. But it was really good because I got to meet a lot of people who knew my grandparents. So it was quite a slow week in terms of activities, and I was staying with retired missionaries who were super lovely, but didn't quite keep up with my pace of doing things. And these lovely people down here, this is a couple called Chris and Kathy, who I met on a whim, who were traveling through Paraguay, revisiting people, but they were good friends of my grandparents. So it was really special to meet them. So by the end of all of this, I was really, really itching to sort of get started. It'd been sort of a slow, I don't want to say boring because that's a bad word to use, but slower, stiller sort of first month than I was expecting. So I was really itching to get started. So I arrived in Salta, which is where my placement was, at the beginning of March. And straight away, answers to prayer. The day before I flew to Salta, I was praying, I was like, God, please just give me a friend. I need some companionship on this trip. And then day one, I met Eden, who is the very smiley girl on the end, and the girl in the middle. I met her, I think, within an hour of getting off the plane, and we've been like the best of friends ever since. She's still there. She's there for 2 years, so she's in it for the long haul. But that was an immediate answer to prayer from God. And yeah, it was straight away I was like, yeah, I'm in the right place now. I was itching to get going. I was like, this is it. This is the moment I've prepared for. Nothing can hold me back now. But it's not always sunshine and rainbows. So this is some photos of Salta. Salta is nicknamed Salta la Linda, which basically just means Salta the Beautiful. So Salta is a city right in the north of Argentina. So you have Argentina, you think Patagonia, Buenos Aires, Salta, and then you have Bolivia, Paraguay up here. It's a really gorgeous city. You can see 2 photos of gauchos. So Salta is a lot more sort of traditional than places like Buenos Aires. Buenos Aires is very multicultural, it's very modern. You walk around and people are talking in all sorts of languages, whereas up in Salta, it's very much like, this is like, everyone here is Argentine, and if they're not, they're from like Bolivia max, nowhere else. So it's very much a different change of pace. I remember my first time seeing a gaucho in the street. I was like, oh my goodness, it's a gaucho. He's riding a horse. Why is no one reacting to this? And then after 7 months, I went, oh, it's a gaucho. He's riding a horse. Just a normal day. So it's a very normal scene. This one here is taken on Avenida Independencia, which is one of the streets I lived on, because it's all blocks. And this was on the 9th of July, which is Independence Day in Argentina. So there was a really long parade all the way down the road. Every school, every sort of social group you could think of was like, social group? I don't know what I mean, but like the cadets and the schools and the nurses and everyone was marching along. And then on the far right, you can see sort of a photo of the city from above. That is from Cerro San Bernardo, which is San Bernardo Hill. And I climbed up there many times, and you get a really gorgeous view of the entire city. This is a good little map of it as well. So this is my house down here, right at the bottom in the south of the city. In the city center, we have San Andres, which was sort of my main church. Towards at the west of the city, we've got Gran Borg, Barrio Gran Borg, which is where we have lots of sort of ministry, like kids groups and stuff. And then right in the north, we've got CES, which is Cristo es Señor or Cristo el Señor, one of them, which was another church. So you can see it's all quite spread out. You can see all of my tags of places that were important. All right, the churches, probably the most important bit. So there's sort of 2 main churches I was involved in. We had San Andres, which was my main church. That's where my family went to. That's where I was doing the most of my ministry with like children's group and kids groups and stuff. But there's also CES. So most of these photos are taken inside CES when we had like a large diocese party sort of service. In the middle there, this is Daniel Escano. He was the Vicar General of Northern Argentina. So his role is to sort of oversee all of the churches in the north of Argentina. You can see me. I'm sat with my host family and then some other people. And then this down here is San Andres. So this is my normal church every Sunday. And then this is sort of a bring and share lunch sort of thing that we had was very similar to Marcham, and there was always food at every church event. I was never hungry. So you can see on this here, this is Hans. He was one of my pastors, and he's married to Priscilla, who was my other pastor. So they're, along with Danny, they were like sort of the pastors that oversaw most of the churches. Okay, Compartir. This is my favorite one I was a part of. So this is my favorite ministry of all. Compartir was twice a week, we did a homeless, like sort of feeding program. Every Wednesday, every Friday, a bunch of volunteer cooks and sort of serving staff would come, and we'd cook and we'd prepare food, and then a bunch of homeless people would come. Some weeks we had up to 80 people, and they'd all come into the church. We'd have tables set up with tablecloths. They'd all come sit, and there'd often be a movie or like music playing, and we'd serve them like that. Compartir was really special for me because I love being in kitchens, but it was a really fun way to sort of experience Argentine kitchen culture and to get to know people. And you really learn that in different places, they really have different ways of doing things. I was told I couldn't chop an onion. I was told I couldn't grate a carrot. I was told I didn't know how to wash up. And so you learn a new way of sort of doing all of the little tasks you thought you'd nailed. There we go. This is Club DTP. So this is a children's group that we ran on Saturdays in San Andres. This was mainly a group for like doing crafts and activities. So I helped a lot with sort of running crafts and activities. I did one where the whole theme was gardening, and we made like little sort of gardens out of like chocolate cake and chocolate biscuits and jelly bean vegetables and everything, which was good fun. But very humbling to try and explain to children what to do in a language you don't speak. It's just like, no, por favor, no. Didn't always understand me, but it was okay. This is the Kids Club in Granborg. So this was also every Saturday, different time. So this is in the west of the city. Granborg is a neighborhood that sort of has two sides. I used to get a very long bus there every Saturday morning. So as you first arrive, it's like massive houses. They're gated, the sort of balconies and terraces. Then you go around a corner, and the paved road ends, and you get onto a kind of a gravel road. So this is on sort of the poorer side of Granborg. It's a lot of like underdeveloped area, half-built houses, everything. But there's a really important ministry they have, serving and looking after these children, doing crafts, doing Bible teaching. So I kind of helped there a lot with running games and stuff. And then, helping in a school. This sort of happened later on in my time, but basically I helped in a school, just a state school up the road from San Andres, and I did a lot of help organizing their library and also helping in their English classes, which was a lot of fun. The library was a challenge and a half, but I feel like my odd jobs that I did before I went away really prepared me. All that organizing I did really sort of set me up well. Salta, May to July. So this is when my parents came, which was a very fun experience. Slightly weird, I have to say. It's like two worlds colliding. You're like, oh, hello, parents. What are you doing here? Oh, okay, I guess I'll take you along then. But it was really fun because we did a road trip. And we went along Route 40, which is a very famous route. And we went to bodegas and vineyards and had wine, and we ate very good food. Just had a lot of good fun and good laughs, and they got to come around to the different projects I was part of and see what I was doing. You can see here this group photo in the middle. This is us with Chris and Elena. These are really important people to me. Chris and Elena were really good friends with my grandparents. Elena used to carry my mum around when she was a baby in a sling, and my grandma was sick. So they were sort of like surrogate grandparents to me in my time there. They lived outside the city in a village called Campo Quijano. And so I'd often get like this 40-minute bus, trundle along and turn up. And Elena would be like, Immy, qué bueno. Then she'd just feed you and feed you and feed you. It's like, do you want cheese? Do you want salad? Do you want biscuits? Are you still hungry? You must eat. It's like, okay, Elena. But that was a really, really special time for me to get to know them and to sort of learn from them, because they're really incredible people. And just the way that their faith plays out in their life. You know, they live to serve and they live to bring people in. There was always someone strange in their house. When I say strange, I just mean some random person would come in and they'd take them in and look after them. Carrying on. Perfect. Oh. There we go. Okay. Off the back of my parents coming, I ended up starting to work with a man called Alec Dean. So Alec Dean is this man you can see in the bottom corner. He is an Irish Argentine. He's a very eccentric man. If you ever meet him, you'll learn this. He was sort of like my crazy uncle out there, you know. He's like, Immy, I have another idea. But I started working with him as he has a foundation called Foundation Seawalk. And it's a foundation that works in the north of Argentina with the indigenous people, selling artwork, doing lots of agricultural work. I think he studied agriculture as a trade. So they do a lot of drilling wells and helping people to sort of fend for themselves. But they do a lot of promoting, encouraging, and selling Wichi artwork. So I've got 2 pieces here, so do come and look at them afterwards. So I helped him sort of organize himself, because he's a brilliant man with brilliant ideas, but 0 organizational skills. So that's where I came in, and I helped him organize and catalog his paintings. So these are some of the painters that you can see. We've got Ronaldo, Emilia, Sara, and we're missing the other guy. But then in the middle we've got Letania. She was the first ever Wichi painter. And she actually had arthritis, so they've got all of these paintings where she's painted in a circle, because instead of sort of giving up painting, they just rotated the canvas so she could keep painting, which I think is very cool. There we go. Okay, this is the north. So I'm sure you've all heard me talk about the north. It's not like in the Game of Thrones. But the north is basically how everyone in Salta refers to the indigenous communities. So this is all sort of the communities that are along the borders with Bolivia and Paraguay, along the Pilcomayo River, and there's another river that begins with B that I've forgotten. But the community is up there. So I was lucky enough to go on 2 trips up there. The first to a community called Misión Chaqueña, which is where a lot of the artists that Alex works with. And we went for the celebration of Pozo 100, which was well 100. They drilled 100 wells, so we all went up, and there was a large celebration, and all of these politicians were there. And we had, I can't remember the name of this dish, but I ate so much of it in my time, but we had this dish, which is basically like maize sort of soup with sort of meat chunks in it. And then I went on to Misión La Paz, which was really special, because that's where my grandparents lived. And I met these girls in the back of a truck. We drove like 8 hours with 4 of us squidged in there, which was very uncomfortable. But the girl with the short hair that you can see sort of in the middle, her name was Eileen, and she was 19 as well. And she was on her way back from the indigenous seminary where she'd been doing her training. So it was really special to meet her. And then you can see what the mud looked like. The roads in the north are not built for minis. You need a truck, and a truck only. In this top right-hand photo, you can see Crisanto. Crisanto is a CMS partner as well, but he's one of 2 indigenous bishops that serve in the north of Argentina. So he, with Daniel Escano, they go around, they visit communities, they support the churches, because the majority of the churches in northern Argentina are made up by the indigenous churches, because there are so many communities up there. So the indigenous church is really, really important. This was my second trip up to the north. This time I went to a place called Juarez, which is one of the more developed parts of the north. But I went to the seminary. So this here you can see, this is the main room of the seminary. So they did all their studying in here, they did all their eating in here, and they did all their sleeping in here. So if you look at the back, you can see their mattresses propped up against the wall. So all the men would sleep in there, and then during the day, they'd put all their mattresses up against the wall, and they'd do their studying, and at night, again, you put them down. But yeah, you can see this was a very random day. We decided to take a girl home to her community, and it was like a 5-hour round trip, and I just ended up with these four men in their truck, no one else, but we had a nice time. This guy in the middle is actually Eileen's dad, and his son visited the UK, and they love their accordions. Accordions are a really big thing. They're playing it all the time. Then this bottom right-hand corner, you can see me in my green shirt, and this long queue of people. Basically, I was tasked with making a spreadsheet. really fun job. And I had to sort of log how much training everyone had done. But I found out quite quickly that everyone seemed to lie about how much training they'd done. And then someone would come up and say, they haven't done that. And I was like, oh, I don't know. I got a bit corrupt quite quickly, but that's okay. Okay, my family. This is my favorite thing from my trip away, so my host family. So before arrival, about a month before I arrived, I messaged Priscilla, who was sort of my link person, and I went, Priscilla, who am I going to be living with? No response. I'd asked her other questions, but she really ignored that question. I was like, oh, I'd love to bring something out that was sort of appropriate for my family, if they have young kids, maybe like a toy or something. Nothing. I arrived in Salta, and I was like, oh, Priscilla, who am I going to be living with? And she was like, oh, there's a nice family in church. I went, who? She said, oh, you'll meet them. I was like, when will I move in with them? She went, I'm not sure. Apparently they're doing something to their house, so you'll stay with us in the meantime. So it was sort of like, okay, who are these people? And I went to church and I met the mum, Anna, but it was very much like, who are these people? Why won't anyone give me information? This is very suspicious. But I was part of a really, really amazing family. So you can see my host mum and my host dad. This is Anna here, my host mum, and this is Kike, my host dad. Then I had 3 sisters. So Delphi, who's in the red shirt, Zoe, who's in the yellow, and Marianne, who's in the black. They were 25, 24, and 14. So I sort of fitted perfectly in the middle. And then I had a nephew called Milo, who was Marianne's son. And then there was sort of the respective boyfriends. And then Abuela, who you can see down here. She was very, very small, so it was hard to see her coming. I mean, I'm not a tall person, but she was about 4'7", so it was quite funny. And then my house, you can see over here, sage green one. You can't see my window, it's at the back. I had a great view. I looked out straight down onto the dogs, so it was very, very scenic. And then this is more photos of me and my family. There we go. This is the day that my younger sister Delphi, she's a roller skater. She's an amazing roller skater, but she was competing in some sort of national championships in Buenos Aires. So we were all watching her on the TV, and this is Di, the best friend of Zoe, who was always in the house. This is us after doing a wild goose chase around Salta, honking our horns to celebrate someone becoming a lawyer, and then just other little scenes. And then this is just a little appreciation for Milo, because he is very cute. Very happy kid. This is actually a very important spot to me. So our house didn't really get any sunlight in it, especially my room. My room was sort of at an angle where it was kind of just permanently dark to a degree. But this was a little spot on the terrace where I used to take my little chair outside, and I used to turn the washing basket upside down, and I used to drink my mate and read my Bible out there and try and get as much sun as possible. And they all thought I was crazy. They were like, Immy, it's winter, what are you doing? And I was like, there's sun outside, there's sun. But this was where I used to do a lot of sitting. Okay, then this is just a few photos from my house. You've got my room, we've got the living room. This is our dining room. And then this here is the garage. Basically, to get upstairs, you had to sort of walk through the garage upstairs, but there was no banister. So every time I walked upstairs, I was right against the wall, don't fall, don't fall, don't fall, because it was quite steep and slippery. But there's that. And then this is photos from around the neighborhood I lived in. So I was living in sort of the south of the city, in a place called San Antonio. And when people used to ask me where I lived, I said, oh, I live in San Antonio. They were like, what are you doing living down there? That's very dangerous. So, but it was fine. But this is a little churrasco sort of sandwich stand that was right outside the house. This is sort of, there was loads of shoes dangling over wires. I've learned that that's a gang thing, but I couldn't tell you exactly why. You can see all the little dogs poking their heads out. Then we've got here. You can see my house there as well, next to the bright green building. This is what my parents dubbed as Dodgy Ditch. So this was a sort of a ditch, a canal, a stream, I don't know what you'd call it, that I had to walk over to get to the bus stop. It was a very interesting ditch. Every time I walked over it, there was definitely something to look at, whether that be someone sleeping, someone lighting a fire, someone getting changed. And I remember saying to my friend, I said, it's funny how quickly I've got used to sort of drug addicts and prostitutes roaming the streets, because that's not a normal sight in Longworth or in Marcham, But I think it was a really important thing to sort of witness and encounter in my time in Argentina. And then these are just some other photos with people. So you can see Chris and Elena again. This is me under the El Gringo sign, which basically means the white person. Milo's first birthday. That middle picture is celebrating Catherine's birthday. She was a girl I met through Spanish classes. This sort of top right-hand corner, that is, so the guy in the forefront is a guy called Ale, who's really important. He was the host brother of Nathan, and he makes the most amazing empanadas ever. Anytime we went over, there'd be like 800 empanadas. So there's lots of sort of empanada parties in their house. And then this is my Spanish school. This is my Spanish teacher in the middle there. That's Graciela, lovely woman, quite scary. Always used to tell me off. But it did help me learn a bit of Spanish. Thank goodness. Well, that's us. Oh, this is the day that I left Salta. Looking quite teary-eyed. Quite blurry in this one. I don't know what's happened here. That's me saying goodbye and heading off. And then section 4. So section 4, Bolivia and Chile and Peru. So I arrived in Lima in July, and I stayed with a lady called Anna Sims. Anna Sims is a CMS partner as well, working in Lima, but she's also Annabelle Testa's godmother. So it was very exciting to meet her. I did some sightseeing. I got to see bits of Lima, tried a lot of food. They have really, really good food in Peru. And after sort of 4 or 5 months of Argentine cuisine, which is just meat, carbohydrate, I was very, very excited to have a vegetable again. So I spent a week in Lima, and during that week, I went to sort of the upper part of the city, which is called Pamplona Alta. Yeah, good. Okay, checking with Paul. Pamplona Alto. And with a woman called Penny, who's been serving in Peru, in Lima, for 40 years. And I got to visit comedors, which are like also feeding centers, and we got to go around and just see a little bit of the other side of Lima that wasn't so sort of like deluxe, shall we say. And then these are just some photos from my travels. I had a really good time. You can see I went to Rainbow Mountain. There was lots of hikes. This is in a national park. Bit of Bolivia, La Paz, meeting Paddington, which was very fun. All sorts of lovely landscapes. Went sandboarding. I went dune buggying. Got to see Machu Picchu. I don't know why of all poses I chose this pose though. You know, but we'll see. But yeah, that was a really, really exciting sort of 2 weeks of like sort of no sleep, stinky shoes, no showering. I was really battered at the end, but it was really worth it. There we go. So my main takeaways. Firstly, so it's 3 words: surrender, depth, and stillness. I think surrender was first of all. I think going into my placement, going into South America, into it all, I had really like big expectations of not so much what I was going to do, but how it was going to feel. I was like, I'm going to go there and I'm going to arrive and I'm going to be like, wow, this is it. I'm being called. But actually it was kind of slightly more underwhelming in many senses. So I had to really learn about like surrendering my ideals, surrendering my expectations, surrendering my gifts and my talents as well. Like I knew what I'm good at is talking, being friends with people and, you know, getting to know people. And that was really tough because suddenly I couldn't talk. I couldn't express anything that I wanted to say. And I was like, So really surrendering up sort of like what I thought God wanted to do with me to what he actually wanted to do with me. Depth, that sort of comes into it. That first month of sort of more stillness and stuff, I had to really learn about like the depth of like going deeper with God, really trusting him, really being tested to sort of only rely on him. But also like depth of relationship. Like a lot of relationship is not just built on conversations, it's about showing people love, and actually you don't always need words to do that. And then stillness as well. Had to learn a lot about being still, because there were times in my placement, in my time in Salta, where there was just not much to do. There was long times of I was like, I've got only 3 activities this week, and I've got so many dead hours, and I have nothing to do, and I've come all this way, and no one's going to give me anything to do. But actually learning to be okay with stillness and not basing my worth on like my productivity. And I think that's something that I really learned in South America. I feel like in the West, we're very good at being like, what you do is sort of who you are, but actually who you are is who you are, and it's very much you being here and you just being who you are is actually way more important than how much you do for the church or the diocese or anything. So that was really, really important. Yeah, it's an ongoing process and we continue to learn about it though. So prayer points, just going forward, continuing to pray is prayers for my family, in particular my sisters. 2 of my sisters in my host family aren't really Christians. They've sort of fallen away from the church. They haven't really got on so well with the people in the church and haven't felt accepted by it. So actually prayers that they will sort of find their way back to Christ. Prayers for the Indigenous church and everything happening there, for the poverty, for the difficulties there. There's been flooding and things. Prayers for workers. There are so many wonderful things happening in Salta. There's so many wonderful things happening in all parts of sort of the Latin American ministry, but it's just needing people. Priscilla, who is one of my bosses, used to be like, the harvest is ready, we just need the workers. So just, yeah, we need people. And then sort of just, I was meant to say bridging, not bringing gaps, but bridging gaps. What I noticed in my time was that an edge that I really discovered was sort of the young adults. I knew loads and loads of young adults in Latin America, people sort of from 17 to sort of 25, and they just weren't in churches. They all had families that went to churches, they had sort of siblings, like younger siblings in church, but they couldn't find their own place in the church. They didn't see, like, there wasn't anything for them. So actually that's a really important thing going forward, I think, sort of finding a place for the young adults of South America in the church. But that's mainly a little overview of what I've done. There is a quiz, but I might do questions because of time. So if anyone has any questions, the time is now. Adam.
If you had your time again, if you could go back to Immy this time last year, what would you say to her in preparation for your time?
Ooh, that's a very good question. What would I say to me in preparation for my time? I think it's be open to be wrong. I think I had to learn a lot about being wrong, about not knowing what was the right thing. And you can't preempt everything. You can read as many books as you want and text as many people in preparation, but actually just be open to learning. Be very spongy, learn from the people around you, learn what others are doing, and don't think that anyone needs you. I remember Danny said this, he said, God doesn't need you, he chooses to use you. What was important wasn't what I brought to the table, it was what God was doing. And I think I was like, oh, I'm going to go and I'm going to do this. But actually, God doesn't need to use you. It's a blessing and it's a privilege when he chooses to. So actually, yeah, I think it's very much be open to sort of being wrong, be open to changing, be open to sort of just realizing that it's not about you, it's about him. Yeah.
You showed us a map of where you were living and the places up north, the church. What's the distance there?
Oh, the distances. I don't actually know. Paul, you don't happen to know, do you? I can find out for you and tell you.
Well, I'm just curious. I mean, were you walking out every day?
No, so Salta as a city is very walkable. I did used to walk. So from my house to San Andres, probably about 40 minutes. To my Spanish class, about 20 minutes. That's walkable, but sort of between Salta and the communities, we're talking maybe like an 8-hour drive. It can be quite extensive. So they often do it in 2 parts and go to a city called Tartagal in the middle before heading up. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing, Immy.
Thank you.
Thinking about how they do church in the places you went to, was there anything about church life that particularly surprised you or encouraged you or made you think, ooh, that's different, you could learn from that,
That is a good question. I'll definitely think about that one more. In many ways, there were lots of similarities because I was part of an Anglican church. There was sort of the going through the motions was very similar. But I think there's a lot of, I think the spirit's really strong in the Latin American church. Prayer is a really, really big thing, and people aren't afraid to pray really long prayers. people aren't afraid to pray big prayers either. Sometimes it can get a bit excessive when, you want to eat your lunch and they're praying for the trees and the birds and the everything. You're like, oh, I'm so hungry. But people, they pray with so much passion and a real belief that God is going to answer their prayers. They're not wishy-washy prayers. People pray, and especially in the indigenous churches, I got to go to a few while I was up there. The congregation is small, it's not big, but when they sing and when they worship and when they pray, it's really powerful. Even though it's small in number, it's very powerful. So I think it's really believe in the power of prayer and use it and believe that God is going to answer your prayers and know that number doesn't equate worth or ability in a church. No, but yes. So I actually do want to keep learning. I really, really enjoyed learning Spanish. And I need to text my Spanish teacher and ask her, because she does online classes. But I'd love to continue to learn Spanish because it's a really fun language. And I love, I picked up all the the gestures, It's a very passionate language, so I would like to carry on learning it.
I understand that South American Spanish is different from Spanish.
Yeah, so they speak something called Castellano, which is sort of a hybrid of Spanish. So there's some differences. But then the Argentines as well, they have a whole different sort of Spanish to the rest of Latin America. So you might say in sort of Peru or Ecuador, you might say tú eres to say you are. But in Argentina, they say vos sos. And when I started, I was like, what is vos? Who is vos? But they have a different Spanish. So, yeah. Top 3 needs, top 3 challenges. My perspective will be different because of what I've seen and what I've experienced. I think for me what I noticed was, in the church I was part of, it was a great church in many ways, but it needs to be open to sort of moving a bit, changing. I was part of a church, it was a very old congregation. It was all age to a degree, but it was a very old congregation. And I think being adaptable to the changes, and that comes with sort of Latin America and the society and sort of machismo and everything, but actually that sort of progression to a degree. I think with the indigenous churches, there's a lot of infighting. I don't know loads about it, but from what I learned and from what I gathered, what we really need is for indigenous leaders and indigenous people from indigenous communities to have the confidence to do it as well. There's really great seminaries that are training people up. What we need is to empower people to feel confident. They're not like, oh, we need the criollo, yeah, leaders to come in. We need the leaders from Salta. We need the city leaders. We need the missionaries. Actually, no, we can do this too. And that empowerment of the indigenous peoples and the younger generations. And then just, I'm not sure about number 3, but I'll think about it. Oh, 100%, yeah. So most of the indigenous communities will all speak Spanish as their second language and speak it well. But 2 of the main languages and 2 of the main communities are the Wichi and the Cherokee. So I learned little bits of Wichi, like antena, which is like a greeting, and Jiwoje, and I think head is like oheletek, but it's a very guttural, throaty language. I really sucked at it, but they're really, they still use them when they speak with each other, but when they do their training, the training's in Spanish. Yeah, so my first trip to the north, I went to a community called Santa Victoria, and we had a service, and it was like a hybrid service. There was English in it, there was Cherokee. So the main body of the service was in Cherokee, but there was also Spanish, so they sort of flipped between the two, and we sang a hymn in English, but that was mainly 3 of us singing in English, but also in Spanish and Cherokee, so it's still really widely used. And because the communities, they're very small, a lot of them, they'll use the language of their community rather than Spanish. But it's mainly when they have visitors that they'll start using Spanish.
I wonder how the gospel comes across in indigenous language.
Oh, yeah, that's a really cool thing, actually. basically, while I was there, they were doing Bible translation. So Chris, who was part of Chris and Elena, he was a big part of translating the Bible into Wi. So while I was there, they were translating the Gospel of Luke, but it's really tough because it's all about sort of how things are portrayed. So they're thinking like, you know, we describe something in one way in English, you know. They beat their chests with like, there was a whole part about, I'm looking at Mum because I think she'll remember. I was thinking about Chris, but they beat their chests because in the Bible, because they were happy that they'd won. They were like full of joy. But then Chris asked the Wi, they said, what does this connote to you? Like if someone beats their chest, and they go, that means sadness. That means we've lost. That's bad. So it's that idea that certain things are interpreted in different ways. So it can't just be a direct word-for-word translation. But also, like in the Wi and Cherokee, they have words that we don't have, or they don't have words for words we have. So it's a really long process, and they have all these people come together, and they can spend like a week translating one sentence because it's really difficult. No, please do.
We've got service starting in here
10, yeah.
in English in 8 minutes.
So, yeah, that's cool.
Thank you, Immy.
That's all
You've had an amazing trip, haven't you?
Yeah.
Can I borrow your microphone?
Sorry, yeah, of course.
Let's pray, and then you can ask Immy lots more things afterwards. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the good news of Jesus, which goes across the world. Thank you for the scope of the gospel and the church in South America and all around the world. Thank you for the joy it is to send people out like Immy to go and serve and experience your grace in a completely different culture. And we pray particularly for that age group, 17 to 25, underrepresented in South American churches, as is the case in many places here too. And so we pray, Lord, for the coming of your kingdom amongst young people in South America. But we thank you for Immy. We thank you for her, what you've done in and through her in these recent months in South America. And we thank you for her today. Amen.
Thank you all very much for coming, listening. I didn't look at my notes once there.